Today we are delighted to have Pat Otto from the Pacific Education Institute and Janet Geer from the City of Bothell, and they're going to run through a very interesting case study about the Drain Ranger curricula.
Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for attending our discussion about Drain Rangers today. My name is Janet Geer. As she mentioned, I'm the Surface Water Program Coordinator for the City of Bothell, and I'm also a co-leader of the STORM group, the Stormwater Outreach for Regional Municipalities group. And today we're going to go through a couple of things. First, we're going to explain where Drain Rangers came from and why. And then we'll discuss the curriculum itself and how it works. We'll explain where we are currently and where we are liking to go. And then we will discuss how you can tap into Drain Rangers and answer any questions that you may have. First, a brief history. As most of you know, the Stormwater Permit, the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, was issued in 2007, and within it, it had education and outreach requirements that had to be initiated by 2009. Some of us in 2007 and 2008 realized that it wasn't effective to create programs for education and outreach in a local vacuum, and that we needed a regional coalition to share resources, to develop large-scale awareness campaigns, and support local on-the-ground behavior change efforts. Thus, that's where the STORM came from in Western Washington. We actually created it using an existing model from the state of Arizona. King County received funding on behalf of STORM from the Department of Ecology to develop a regional awareness campaign and a website. That's Puget Sound Starts Here. And there was also a small amount of funding to provide some youth education materials, and that's where Drain Rangers was initially started. So with that effort, basically what was created originally were just supplemental materials for existing programs that people were working on. It contained basic information on what was wrong with Puget Sound, what kids could specifically do at home to help, and then it had a pledge so that they could become deputized as a drain ranger and promise to protect Puget Sound, and then they would receive a badge for that. Sometimes the badges were given at events after they filled out the pledge. It was given out during presentations, existing youth education presentations, and then on the website we had a specific drain ranger section where they could take the pledge, learn about the issues with Puget Sound, and then we would mail them a badge. Also, other materials were created like basic color pages and simple resources for educators. So in 2010, Snohomish County received a grant of regional or statewide significance, they call them gross grants, to further the Puget Sound Starts Here campaign. And within there was also a very small amount of funding to further develop the Drain Ranger model. Through this, a new brand was created. You see the shield here. What we found out was that kids did not watch Western movies like most of us growing up, so they didn't identify with the little 5-point star badge. They identified with the shields that police officers currently wear. So we went through development of a new brand that kids would recognize. And then we created a resource, basically a style guide for how to use some of the Drain Ranger materials. We also went through a strategic planning session where we developed the target audiences, goals, and objectives for the program. And then in 2013, the new Stormwater Permit had added youth education as a specific target audience, which obviously makes sense because they're a very important audience that's open to learning, known to influence parents on behaviors at home, and they'll obviously be entering as adults and into our jurisdictions capable of making decisions that can harm or help water quality. But what it being in the permit caused jurisdictions to look critically at what was being taught in their jurisdictions. And what they found was that stormwater education is being administered sporadically in some schools and not at all in others. As an example, some larger jurisdictions have staff that actually provide the education. Some utilize either nonprofits or for-profit organizations who enter the schools and provide presentations. Some were providing curriculum, and some did not have the ability to provide anything. But regionally, this meant that students were not giving a basic understanding of stormwater concepts across the board. You know, some students were getting 3 presentations, some were getting none. And then that was causing issues with the polluted stormwater runoff. And so we realized it wasn't enough to provide these supplemental materials, that we needed to develop a curriculum. And a lot of teachers didn't have a good understanding of basic stormwater concepts, including what stormwater is or watersheds, that type of thing. So to address this issue, we looked into the best way of providing this curriculum to schools. It isn't possible to develop a lesson or curriculum, deliver it to the districts, and expect them to distribute. That's not how schools work. And what we found by talking with a lot of the educators is they don't appreciate you providing curriculum without including them. You really need to work with the educators to find out exactly what's needed, what's already available, where are the gaps, tailor it to meet all of their requirements, and then work directly with them to implement and develop that curriculum. Teacher training must also be provided to ensure they're comfortable with the concepts and comfortable with administering the lessons, and oftentimes they need tools and materials to help them along the way. And all those materials and the curriculum itself need to be readily accessible. They need to be free and provided to them. I just attended another webinar on the East Coast, and they're finding the same thing across the nation, that a lot of the teachers are having to pay for their own training if you don't provide it, and that if they're in class, they also need that teacher stipend to pay for a substitute teacher in order for them to attend your sessions. So knowing that, Storm realized that we needed partners that had funding, the education expertise that we needed, the essential education connections in order to develop the curriculum and encourage its implementation. And at the same time, Puget Sound Partnership had some available funding, interest in working with us, and they had already retained the Pacific Education Institute to develop modules related to stormwater. Pacific Education Institute has the knowledge and expertise to know how the schools operate, the most current state standards, and what's useful to the classroom teachers. So we partnered with the Puget Sound Partnership and the Pacific Education Institute to work with our existing stakeholders, with the educators, the curriculum administrators, and other interested parties to determine what was already available and what needed to be created. The resulting curriculum you are about to see from PEI was developed in a way that it's seen as a gift to the teachers. Their ability to simulate the format of the measurement of student progress, which is a test that public schools have to take each spring, using the stormwater as a theme, has removed as many barriers as possible for the teachers to implement the curriculum and encourage its use in the region. So without further ado, I will introduce Pat from Pacific Education Institute so that she can explain how the curriculum works.
So my name is Pat Otto, and as you see, we're working the Drain Rangers stormwater curriculum. And I worked on this with everyone, and then my other co-writer was Nancy Scarlett. And the two curriculums we developed are called Drain Rangers, Investing Polluted Stormwater Runoff in Elementary Grades, and then a secondary, which is Engineering Solutions. And as Janet mentioned, we work with Puget Sound Starts Here, Puget Sound Partnership, and the Storm Group with Drain Rangers, along with curriculum directors and teachers, were part of our team to develop this curriculum. And I always like to think of the real-world context, so this is a phrase comic. So yes, Caulfield, will this turn up on the test? Oh, you know that's my least favorite question. Sorry. Oh, yes, Caulfield, will this turn up in real life? Anything interesting happen to class? Well, Mrs. Olson has a new least favorite question. And we want to answer Caulfield's question in terms of letting students know the real-world context of what they're doing and how important it is. So we're going to start with some acronyms. Now, most of the people I think online are probably with storm groups or conservation groups, so you know BMPs and LIDs, which are best management practices and low impact development. But now I thought we'd just go over a little of the education E's. So we have Common Core ELA and we have NGSS. Common Core ELA are our state standards for English language arts. There are also math ones, but this curriculum does not deal with math. It just does the English language arts. And this English language arts is tested with an assessment called Smarter Balanced Assessment for English language arts. And as Janet mentioned, this is what students are doing in our state. So every student from 3rd grade to 8th grade and then 10th and 11th sits for this test in the spring. This last spring was the first year they did that. So this is really on a lot of teachers' minds. But the cool thing about this exam is it is really how we want students to learn to process information in this world where we see so much coming on the web. Anyways, processing information is so important to our literate students. So the smartest balance, the assessment of English language arts has performance tests in them. And these are scenario-based and looking, again, asking students to write an essay and answer some research questions. So that's the Smarter Balanced exam. For Next Generation Science Standards, that NGSS, we have 3 strands when we're looking at those standards in the classroom. There's science and engineering practices. That's what science and engineers do. Asking questions, defining problems, analyzing, interpreting data. Then there's disciplinary core ideas, which includes life, earth, and physical sciences that we're all used to that was the content of science. And then we have cross-cutting concepts. Sort of like to think of these as the thinking skills or the process skills of scientists, looking for patterns, cause and effect, structure and function, all those 7 things mentioned there. But what's important, or a big emphasis here, is not only were there science practices of the scientists, but engineering is also called out. And it is also called out in disciplinary core ideas. So besides earth, life, and physical, we're looking at engineering as a content. So this is really important, and we're talking about next gen of solving problems, of looking at human problems and solving them using science. So looking at that engineering design a little further, we're just thinking about it as defining a problem, developing solutions to the problem, then optimizing or testing that solution, and then making it even better. You'll see there's also some little boxes there with lessons. So we identified which of the lessons in the curriculum get to that point in that engineering design. Looking even closer, developing solution is where we will find those best management practices in your low impact development when students are going to be looking for solutions to the stormwater runoff problems that they discover. So what's unique about this curriculum again is it has an English language arts performance task, and it uses engineering design with students. So starting with this performance task, there's one at the elementary called Stormwater Pollution and Stormwater Engineers at secondary. So let's explore this elementary performance task so you get a better idea of what this is all about. So this one is for 3rd through 5th grade, so you have to keep that in mind. And we're using these performance tasks for building background knowledge about stormwater pollution. So it's set up scenario, so this is like a fake situation that students can be engaged in, and the scenario is the essay that they need to produce at the end. So the PTA at your school is sponsoring a stormwater information night to help protect our local waters. They have asked each child to write an essay explaining what stormwater is, how stormwater gets polluted, and 2 actions we can take to keep the stormwater clean. You will read an article, view a video, and study a diagram to build your knowledge of stormwater pollution. Then you will write an essay to share at the parent information night. So again, they see 1 video and 2 readings. They'll answer 3 research questions and an essay. So this is just the same format as the assessment, but now we're using it in the classroom in a very interesting and real-world context. So at the end of my presentation, we will show you the 15 minutes to Puget Sound, the video that students watch. And then there's a reading that's called Let's Visit Stormville. And this was developed by the Storm Group. Thank you, Janet, and your team. And that's one of the challenges when you're bringing real-world context to the classroom is that reading level and finding materials that engage and students can access. And so that's really critical in developing curriculum for schools. And so we were so lucky to work with Storm on this. The second reading is reading a poster or a diagram, and this is called The Culprits. And again, so then it does with illustrations what we did in the reading to access those students can access both the reading material and now they have a different way to access that knowledge. This is one of the ones we probably would like to work on in our next steps in terms of making it more regional friendly. This curriculum also has student pages, so for this performance task it has, what stormwater is, so templating, and so that's another valuable resource here in terms of scaffolding for students. So the 3 questions for this performance task are, what is stormwater runoff? Be sure to name your source, so they're locating information. What do you learn in the article about stormwater pollution that you didn't learn in the diagram? So you're selecting which is the best information for me. And then you append the statement using information from 2 or 3 sources. Be sure to name your sources. We can make a difference in keeping our water healthy and clean. So these are supposed to be small, short answers and get students ready for their essay. And that's the essay that I talked about before. So students do see the video, do the readings, answer some questions, and then they write an essay. In summary, performance tests build background knowledge for the unit's essential content of stormwater runoff pollution. Students practice the research skills they must demonstrate when assessed on that Smarter Balance test. Students practice the writing skills measured on the new assessments, again, that Smarter Balanced exam. And this is a great opportunity for your student outreach programs to offer as a pre-lesson to what you are already doing, either just the readings or doing the whole performance task. Now for the science. Now I really connect with science teachers because that's my background, being a science sort of geek. And so I use this slide when we do the performance task because they're not used to doing English language arts. So now we're into engineering design. So we're back to this. This is for elementary. And now you'll see there's a green circle there. So Janet mentioned about watershed models. So that background comes before defining the problem. So students need a little understanding. So we've put that in our curriculum as well. So those are the background models of watersheds where they're drawing their local system. So now we have engineering design. And again, it has numbers, but it doesn't always have to go in a linear fashion. You define the problem, you research the problem, understand stakeholders to understand constraints, explore and compare possible solutions, develop a plan, implement the plan and test it, optimize or improve your plan, and communicate to others. So with defining the problem, there are more videos and readings if teachers feel their students need them, or they can just use the performance task in terms of defining that stormwater surface runoff problems of quantity, too much surface water running off causing erosion and flooding, and the quality, pollutants from land surfaces being carried by surface water runoff into waterways. For researching the problem, students then go outside and identify features in the schoolyard system that impact water flow and the collection of pollution in that system. So for that we give students a legend to do, and so that they can look right outside their door, go outside, look on their schoolyards and see where things are happening. They look for pervious and impervious surfaces. They look for erosion happening. They look for a deposition of materials, leaves, soil, and twigs. Whoa, deposition seems like a big word for 3rd to 5th graders, but they have land and water kits in many of the schools, and deposition is one of the key concepts in that land and water kit. So we want to really use that terminology that they are using and reinforce the ideas that they're getting from their science kits and units that they're already doing. They're looking for puddles or totally soaked areas, looking for pollution. Here we see some oil on the city street. And then they also look for plants and soil that will slow down the water in their schoolyard. So looking at the whole system. And storm drains about where their water is headed and where it could be collecting that pollution. So here's just an example of what one of those drawings might look like with all the legend being used on the drawing. So now I really wanted to explore and compare possible solutions. So this is where your BMPs and LIDs come in. So they'll have to decide at elementary whether to do an outreach, a pollution prevention, or a schoolyard solution. So pollution prevention, as you all know, means changing personal actions such as using less fertilizer and cleaning up after your dog, which can stop pollution at its source. Schoolyard solutions, solutions in the schoolyard, to have stormwater runoff soak into the ground to filter out pollutants before it reaches creeks, streams, lakes, and Puget Sound. For the explore and compare possible solutions, again, thanks to Janet and the STORM team, they developed, there's 10 of them, those best management practices, but now we're calling them solutions for the design process for student reading. So again, this is just an invaluable resource that's at their kid level and has targeted what they're going to try to use in their notes. So these pollution prevention and schoolyard solutions include the yard, limit fertilizer, use herbicides, pesticides sparingly. The car, obviously this is one of your don't drip and drive, I love this one, fix the leak. And your pet, scoop the poop. So previous when I was just talking to Heidi before we started this, I do want to share about how students impact parents and their neighbors. So Nancy Scarrett that helped write this and does the performance tasks, she'd been teaching a similar curriculum in her district in Tahoma in Maple Valley. And her husband was walking his dog and forgot to bring his bags with him. And he passed a student who came up to him and said, you know, you really need to scoop your poop, and was very gracious and told him the reasons why and really informed him. And so normally we would be taken aback by somebody fronting us, but Nancy was so excited to see that her curriculum was making a difference. So I thought that was a great story. So for Schoolyard Solutions, we're looking at planting trees and native plants. One of my favorites, trees. Soil improvements, composted soils, rain gardens, disconnecting downspouts, rain barrels and cisterns, pervious pavement, and pavers. So again, there are student pages, and you have the classroom would be comparing 3 or 4 solutions, thinking about benefits and drawbacks. So again, this is just scaffolding to give teachers an idea of how to do that comparison that we're asking them to do in engineering design. For secondary, I just thought I'd share the Explore and Compare Solutions has students going in their school campus and actually looking for engineering solutions that are already on their campus, and then also looking for problem areas and seeing how they can improve that. So that's just a little more in depth in terms of that secondary feature. So you develop a plan. So for pollution prevention outreach, you know, that could be posters, brochures, postcards, websites, skits, and presentations, so that we even talk about it for them. That's an education outreach campaign. So these again are 2 examples from the region. For the Schoolyard Solutions, the things we talked about, plantings is just an example. And again, there's student pages to help them with, oh, what's some tip? There's a tip sheet, and there's scaffolding for, oh, for doing my schoolyard, do I have to contact maintenance? Who are the other people I have to contact? Who might I get money from? All the things we think about when we plan a project. Then we go on to testing the solution. So for pollution prevention outreach, that could be action cards or pledges or looking back surveys. Or they could even do a test with a couple of their classrooms before they go live, as they say. And the Schoolyard Solutions, these are some nice examples of models of WSU Extension and Puyallup that I got to see. So those, you could actually do investigations to test your solution, comparing slopes that are planted or not, measuring puddles. I know in Issaquah when they did it, put in a swale, all of a sudden the water in the street nearby disappeared in the heavy rain. So that was a great solution. Compare absorption rates in soils if that was one of your solutions. And then you could do the models of solutions like we talked about, soil columns, stream tables, and trees and erosion. And we also show them the video that Jennifer McIntyre is in from WSU Extension in terms of her work of using models to show that rain gardens are effective, so that they have an idea of what do I mean by a model. So we've really tried to give that information and find all that interesting things for the teachers and the students to use. So then, of course, you want to summarize, evaluate, and reflect. So students do that in this curriculum as well. So in summary for this, we have an ELA performance task with readings and videos. We have engineering design, including testing a solution. So anytime you can use any of those pieces and tell people, oh, here I'm telling you about a problem. This is part of design. You don't have to do the whole design process. Modeling, anytime we're doing models, both in testing or watershed models, just making sure we call them models. That's a key part of the practices of science and engineering. The student readings are really a valuable resource. Again, I can't emphasize that enough in terms of they're at student level. The video links are all there for you to use. And student journal pages in terms of getting ideas of, oh, how should I ask students to process this? How can I scaffold them to get information, even if I come as a presenter, that if I gave them a sheet of what I want them to get out of my talk, they're more likely to do it. And flexible, use what you want with your outreach. So any of these things, again, you may not want to give teachers a whole performance task, but oh my goodness, that's a great reading for them to do before I come to see those schools or those kids. So it's the Drain Ranger curriculums. There's elementary and secondary, and where we are now. So we piloted both curriculums in the spring, in March and April, and we got teacher feedback, some of which I've shared with you. And then we trained in June more interested teachers up in Marysville. They were very excited. We had 12 elementary and 8 secondary. The 12 elementary had worked on other projects and known about the performance tasks, and so they were very excited to receive this. And they were excited when I was there. They were so excited to see the scores of their kids on this exam. So they're really excited about this way of teaching kids and having them synthesize information and writing essays about it. And we had 8 secondary, and I think that was because of one of their pilot teachers. One of the teachers that piloted was a high school teacher from there, and he was just overly enthusiastic. I mean, he was just, it was incredible that he thought this was so valuable for his students. So that was really great feedback. And these are complete, as I keep mentioning, with all the supporting materials. As Janet mentioned, that's so key for teachers that they don't have to look things up in their busy schedules and all we're asking them to do. So the readings and the video links are all complete there. And it's totally accessible on the Puget Sound Starts Here website, pugetsoundstartshere.org/drainrangers, or just remember Drain Rangers when you go to Puget Sound Starts Here. Where are we going? We want to do some more teacher training statewide, and I'm already presenting this at the Washington Science Teachers Association conference in October, I hope, if I get accepted, and that's up in Shoreline. We want to improve the resource materials. As I mentioned, some of them, we have a great video from Massachusetts and one from Minnesota, and we'd like to make them more regional, along with some of our other materials that we really want them to be regional and reflect what and we got great teacher feedback from that as well, that they really loved the regional videos we had for them. We want to promote the use. We want to have an evaluation. Is this working to meet the outcomes that you have and students have? So we have different ways to evaluate. And then there's a statewide conference for stormwater education that we want to share this with. If you go to the website, this is what it looks like. So these are downloadable, and then you'll note there are PowerPoints and resources that go with them. So that was how we did that. So if you look at that as well. So anyways, I couldn't get to my last slide, and it just shows what happens when you pull down those resources. So you can get a direct link to most of the videos that are in there. So the one we're going to show you next is that 15 minutes to Puget Sound.
Did you know the largest source of water pollution today is polluted stormwater runoff? As rain lands on our rooftops, lawns, and pavement, the water picks up whatever debris and pollutants may reside there. Pesticides, animal waste, salts, oil, and litter. This stormwater runoff flows into storm drains where it travels through underground pipes that in most communities leads directly to rivers and lakes. In our region, most of stormwater that enters our local streams and lakes ends up in Puget Sound or the Pacific Ocean, with all the pollutants from our cities and neighborhoods it picked up along the way. This pollution hurts us, our fish, and our wildlife, but it doesn't have to be this way. When rain and stormwater are allowed to drain into the ground, the earth is able to filter out most pollutants naturally. By the time it does reach rivers and lakes, it's not only cleaner, it's cooler, and there's less of it. And that's better for the fish, better for the invertebrates that fish eat, and better for the plants that live in and around the water. It's also better for humans and property, as we need clean water for drinking, eating, and playing, and flooding and related problems are less likely. And it costs a lot to create and maintain stormwater infrastructure, so any steps to address water pollution in our community will make better use of our public funds. The key to cleaner and healthier water and more sustainable communities is to capture rain where it falls by helping it drain into the ground as nature intended. We can do this through installing rain barrels or cisterns, building rain gardens or planting trees, installing porous pavement, or just by limiting the amount of dense and hard surfaces in our community. More green space, less asphalt and pavement.
To learn more, visit the How You Can Help section of the Puget Sound Starts Here website, pugetsoundstartshere.org. Brought to you by Puget Sound Starts Here and Storm, with permission from the original creators, the West Michigan Environmental Action Council.
Okay, so the question is, any issue with having links to Don't Drip and Drive and other sites on our own county outreach website? So this is just a sharing information and access question.
This is Janet. We don't have any problem with you sharing Don't Drip and Drive. In fact, we highly encourage it in addition to the Drain Ranger curriculum. Any of the stuff that Storm produces, we'd like to share widely.
And we have, for the high school or the secondary, we're asking them to go beyond the materials we give them.
And then Eric also just asking about video availability. How do people get access to that great video?
It's available on the website. I've got the video file that I can send. I think it's 9 megabytes, so as long as you can accept that, or if you have an FTP site, we'd be happy to share.
So Caitlin asks, how will you decide where to hold teacher trainings?
I think that that's a combination of your interests, that you connect with the STORM group, and then PI working together, or contacting either Jan and I, say, oh, we really have an interested group.
It was a great presentation.